With this video, I continue presentation of information about social insects, and we will talk about mystery of longevity. And today's video about ants. It's really fascinating information. For me, it was new. I didn't know these details, but it is again a lot of important information for us if you want, for those who want to live longer. So here's some pictures, and first I will present abstract, and again please download. The video is relatively long. You can download the presentation as PDF file, the link in the description, and then to get more information by clicking to the links and to get into the sources. And the abstract is such: development of ants larvae to a specific caste is controlled by level of nutrition, hormones, and pheromones. Longevity of the adult ants depends on nutrition, of course, first, but also on hormones and pheromones. But indeed, adult ants cannot eat solid food. Only the ant larva can chew and process the solids. Adult workers and soldiers feed on fluids collected by workers' foragers. That includes sap from plants, hemolymph from other insects, also from hemolymph from larvae, and some fluids from eggs. Upon returning to the nest, the foragers regurgitate a portion of the fluid and pass it on to other ants. The queen in the developed country, in the developed colony, feeds exclusively on larvae hemolymph of own babies and may live for over a decade. So you see, even if they have fluid larvae or eggs from other insects, they prefer to feed exclusively on the larval hemolymph of own babies. This is strange and very interesting. Okay, let's go into details. The global numbers of ants have been estimated as between 1 and 10 million billion, so it is 10 in power 15, 10 in power 16 of individual insects, and surely a part of this success is based on a division of labor or caste system in ants colonies. Morphology, longevity, and behavior of ants differ profoundly between the castes. A small number of individuals of the colony, namely the queens, live for decades and reproduce, while other adult ants live shorter than a year, but they construct, maintain, and defend the nest, collect and share food, rear the brood, the larvae. Only a small number of workers leave the nest for foraging. A soldier can have 100 times the body mass of a minor worker, which is like minima, named minima, and development of larvae towards a certain caste is mediated by epigenetics, that is, by environment, food, hormones, and pheromones. Epigenetics refer to gene expression in the DNA sequence. An obvious example of epigenetics is cellular differentiation in the development of multicellular organisms. Despite the enormous diversity in cells types in an individual animal, these cells are essentially clones and all share the same genes. Okay, again, our body consists of many cells, and every cell it is just a clone of some previous cell, and egg which we got from mother and fertilized by sperm. Okay, but yet again, the cell types are so different, and this is a result of epigenetics. No change of the genetic is necessary, but epigenetics. So expression or suppression of the genes. So see here we see how the same, genetically equivalent, genetically identical ants, how they develop. There are very small minima, working ants. There are worker forager, which is collect the food outside, and there are soldiers with huge head, and its role it is to protect the nest. Here we see even more different castes. It is in Texas leaf cutter. We see the queen, we have the king or drone, and we have so many different size ants, from minima, from very small size, to the soldier. One mechanism of the gene expression is DNA methylation, the covalent attachment of the methyl group to a cytosine nucleotide. Research on ants and honeybees points to DNA methylation as a crucial factor in determining the caste of the developing individual larva. So sirtuins, a family of nicotine adenine dinucleotide dependent enzymes, so it is sirtuins are proteins and so they are enzymes, and they are involved in the cell metabolism and can regulate many cellular functions including DNA repair, inflammatory response, cell cycle, or apoptosis of the cell. Of the 7 identified sirtuins, sirtuin 1 and 2 orchestrate acquisition of DNA methylation. So how methylation is going? We have cytosine here, molecule of cytosine, and aromatic amino acid, and it can be with addition of this methyl group can turn to the methyl cytosine and back. Methylation, demethylation. 2 ant species, the Florida carpenter ant and Jordan's jumping ants, were investigated in this following presentation 10 years ago, and these 2 species of ants differ profoundly in the rigidity of the caste structure. Adults of one caste of the carpenter ants can never become members of another. Meanwhile, workers of the jumping ants can become functional queens if their colony has lost its queen. The authors discovered clear difference in methylation between the ant castes. Also, these differences are less pronounced in the jumping ants. So, mechanism of selective methylation is not yet understood. So I may speculate that environment and food defines the development and future of individual larvae and even individual adults. Okay, here's for the carpenter ants. Like in adult wasp and bees, and adults, including queens, are limited to liquid diets. Again, bees and wasps even they can consume pollen, but the pollen, very small particles of the pollen, which has protein and fat, lipids, fat, but not so in ants. Ants are more limited. Only the adult insects, adult ants, they consume only liquid food. Because the passageway between the head and abdomen, where food is digested, is so narrow that solid pieces of food wouldn't fit through it. Meanwhile, the ants' larvae are able to eat a wider range of food that adult workers, foragers, provide to them, or foragers or the nest workers. Predative ants capture and feed the larvae with caterpillars, larvae, and eggs of other insects. Okay, so in some ant species, both queens and female workers can produce so-called trophic unfertilized eggs to feed larvae. It is especially so when it is only the beginning of the colony, so the establishing colony. Okay, the opposite is true when the queen and adult ants in some ant species feed on the larva hemolymph. So it is happening in developed, already established colony. So it is not in the beginning, but in established colony it can happen so. So this method is larval hemolymph feeding. So they are sucking blood from own babies. Here's this picture of them. And presented schematically, you see the head and abdomen. The passageway is so narrow that only a liquid can get through. Here again we see that narrow constriction at the throat and waist that leads to that. Here you see so tiny. So only solid solid particles cannot get through. Meanwhile, the larva is different. Its composition is different, and the body composition is different, and it can consume solid food and digest it. The hemolymph in insects is the major transport medium for the exchange of nutrients, waste products, and signal substances such as hormones between cells. Through chemical composition of the hemolymph, it maintains the proper environment for the cells. The hemolymph consists of the liquid plasma and the cellular hemocytes. Plasmacytes are the hemocytes responsible for cell ingestion. I mean, it is phagocytosis is a very important part of the immune system, and they represent about 95% of circulating hemocytes. Plasma is usually a clear fluid containing higher level of potassium in the insects feeding on plants, or higher level of sodium otherwise. Okay, you can read more about this hemolymph, and we see that the cells in the hemolymph, we have cells, and most of them, they are plasmatocytes, and they are an important part of the immune system to digest viruses, bacteria, and fungi, and so they are responsible for phagocytosis. But also, what is also happening, this hemolymph can be coagulated, and so that in case of injury, it coagulates and turns to some kind of solid gel. Normally, the larva can survive moderate loss of hemolymph without any problems. For example, while workers are predatory on spider eggs, their queen does not feed directly on this easy prey. It is possible that that larva hemolymph feeding function as a filter, providing protection against toxins and parasites. The queen in the developed colony depends exclusively on the larva hemolymph feeding, and trophic eggs also for her nutrition. But during founding of the colony, that is with small population of workers, the queen suppresses this larva hemolymph feeding and feeds on prey, so it is fasting. Meanwhile, the workers seldom perform this larva hemolymph feeding, except the cases when the colony is starving. Okay, you see, this is again very important information that queens consume eggs. Eggs, not fertilized eggs, which these eggs produced by other workers, or sucking blood from babies. But again, it's sucking blood of babies. It's probably a part of the caste creation. So if they suck more blood, then the larva will be smaller, and it will develop to smaller size and like minima. Or it is, if it is not so, and larva grow longer and get into bigger size, it can be a soldier. Dracula ants really feed on the blood of their own larvae, and adult workers hunt prey for their larvae to eat, and also they feed on hemolymph of the prey, and later on they feed on the larva body fluids. Okay, so you see, they supply food for own larvae, but they also feed on the hemolymph of the larva, mostly on the prey, but also on the larva of the babies. This unusual strategy of non-destructive cannibalism closes the loop of this interesting food supply among the colony generations. In some species, the larva have special organs that exude the hemolymph for adult ants. Okay, they like milking. The larva can even like milk and produce this hemolymph and then other working bees, workers, they lick and they consume this fluid. In ant predators, the workers and the queens, or the queen only, are incapable of the direct transfer of food between individuals within the colony, and instead they consume the hemolymph of the larva and trophic eggs produced by other workers. You see, again, what we see, that normally the working ants, they exchange fluids, and foragers bring some fluids from outside to the nest, and they exchange this food, these fluids between the all the nest colony. But sometimes it happens so that even workers inside the nest, including bees, of course, they are incapable to get food from other foragers. Instead, they consume the hemolymph of own baby. So, and because baby can eat the insects and other solid food, or otherwise some workers produce trophic eggs, and also they consume this liquid from the eggs. Interesting. So Dracula ants live mostly in the tropics of Africa, Australia, and Asia, and spend most of their lives buried into the tree trunks or underground. The colonies may contain as many as 10,000 workers, and some winged males and several wingless queens. These ants are specialized predators on soil centipedes and other insects. Workers attacked and kill them by stinging or to carry them back to the nest. The centipedes are cut up or masticated by the workers, and these workers also feed on any hemolymph oozing from them, and after which larvae are placed on the prey to feed. Okay, so to feed larvae. The queen feeds, as I said, exclusively by larva hemolymph feeding. Okay, the workers may engage in this behavior in case of some starvation. So it is not only the queen, but queen never use hemolymph from other sources, only own babies. Here's a picture how the Dracula ants attacking a soil centipede. Centipedes are the poisonous insects, you know. And here, not the same ants. This, I believe, the weaver ants, which are very common in Asia, in Thailand, for example. They are hunting for any kind of insects and bring these insects to the nest to feed the larvae. The concentration of free amino acids in the insect hemolymph can be as high as 50 or 100 times that of mammalian plasma. Other organic components in the hemolymph include carbohydrates such as inositol, sugar alcohol, hexosamines, and mannitol, glycerol, and also various Krebs cycle intermediates, uric acid, and soluble proteins. Free lipids are present also and used as fuel for flight. Content of saturated fatty acids exceeded that of the unsaturated fatty acids. So, okay, it's again, saturated fatty acids are more than unsaturated fatty acids. Soluble proteins include uric proteins produced by female fat body. Several enzymes such as vitamins B1, B2, and C appear in the hemolymph. Okay, we see here larval hemolymph feeding in Dracula ants. As I said, these Dracula ants inside the nest, they cannot exchange food with foragers. Instead, they sucking blood, sucking hemolymph from own babies. And here we see that this arrow places here. It is special places where that this hemolymph taps of the between this is fourth and fifth segments of the larva. So these are places where the hemolymph is taken from the larva. This is the queen feeding on the hemolymph of larvae. So, okay, you see how it works. It is not destructive. They are not killing the babies. They just suck a little bit of the hemolymph. And I believe it is, I didn't find this information, but I believe that the more the queen is sucking hemolymph, the smaller will be the caste of the adult ant. So like minima ants, they have smaller size just because, and the queen consumes too much of hemolymph, and therefore the body does not develop to larger size. But again, I didn't find this information in the publication. I suspect that it is so, but I don't know. Nutrition affects the level of juvenile hormone during a critical period of soldier determination in some this ants species. Low juvenile hormone levels lead to the development of a worker. Well-nourished larvae have higher juvenile hormone levels, and it leads to prolonged growth of body and head of a soldier. Soldiers produce an inhibitory pheromone that blocks the effect of juvenile hormone. Exogenous juvenile hormone applied to working larvae after the soldier critical period. This was done in laboratory, of course, not on the colony, which is in the wild. So then this was experiment done, and then what is happening? This hormone can extend the growth period and result in giant workers, not soldiers, giant workers, even of abnormally large size. The soldier inhibiting pheromone is a contact pheromone that functions to limit excessive production of soldiers in an ant colony. You see here. We see here so big difference between the soldier and the working ants. Very big difference, and it depends on nutrition and level of the juvenile hormone. So again, high nutrition produce results in high level of juvenile hormone, and then it can this can go to the soldier. The development of it leads to prolonged growth and large head of the ants, so the soldiers. But genetically they are identical. Normally, if nutrition is low, then juvenile hormone is low, and we have working ants like this. But in experiment, this hormone was supplied extra to the larva, and then it is results in prolonged growth. But instead of soldier, giant workers were produced. So the same like workers, but big size somehow. Okay, again, interesting that not only the nutrition, of course, it's important, but also hormones and regulation of the hormones is by contact with soldiers. If there are too many soldiers in the colony, then they suppress growth of the larva to soldier caste. Colonies of fungus growing ants, they have special name, etine, are among the most impressive animal phenomena in the world. They can have nest volumes of 1,000 liters and may persist for decades and contain millions of sterile workers, which are normally the offspring of a single queen. The agriculture of symbiosis with fungi has allowed these ants to occupy previously inaccessible niches that have abundant food resources. The most derived genera of the etine ants have become dominant herbivores of the New World tropics. The fungus the ants grew eventually became reproductively isolated and co-evolved with the ants. Again, this specialization started 150 million years ago, very long time ago. Then they developed such kind of fungus which doesn't exist in the wild, but it is only exists inside the colony. Typically, one queen lives per colony. Every year after the colony is about 3 years old, the queen lays eggs of female and male elates, so this with wings, and the reproductive ants that will pass on the genes of the queens. Before leaving the nest, queens, these new queens, young queens, load some of the fungus mycelium into dorsal food pouch. These winged males and queens then take their nuptial flights to mate high in the air. After the mating flight, queens cast off their wings and begin their descent into the ground. After creating a narrow entrance and digging 20-30 centimeters straight down, she creates a small, about 6 centimeter size chamber. Here she spits out fungus and starts her colony garden. So we have here this allied winged queen and king and working ant. After about a week of this underground growth, so the queen produce some eggs, and the eggs develop to larvae, and after about a week of this underground growth, workers open the closed entrance and begin foraging, staying close to the nest. The fungus begins growing at much faster rate because the foraging workers bring some pieces of cellulose, or wood or leaves from outside to the nest. And from this point on, the only work of the queen does, the only work the queen does is egg laying. Founding queens rarely move from a single location, which is typically in a centralized fungal garden. Workers take their eggs and move them to another gardens, fungal gardens. Differences in size between the working castes begin to develop after a colony is well established. Tasks in the colony are divided not only by the size of the workers, but their age too, like in bees. So here we see how the colony begins. The founding queen produces eggs, and larva is growing, but larva feeds on unfertilized egg. You see this little small egg, yellow color. So the larva eat eggs. It is feeding on eggs. But then first generation of the working ants produced, and then colony gets established in time. Okay, first foragers bring in and drop leaf fragments on the nest chamber floor. Workers that are usually slightly smaller clip these pieces into segments that are about 1-2 millimeters across, and the smaller ants then crush these fragments and mold them into damp pellets by adding fecal droplets and kneading them. They add the pellets into the larger pile of other prills, and even smaller workers then pluck loose strands of fungus from dense patches and plant them on the surface of the freshly produced pile. The smallest workers, the minimum, move around and keep up the garden by delicately prodding the piles with their antennas, licking the substances and plucking out the spores and heap fire of the unwanted mold species. Again, you see that these minimums, they take care of the growing fungus. And even they produce some kind of antibiotic that to kill other type of fungus only, so that they really garden taking care of the garden. But this is a foraging workers. They are larger size, of course. They bring pieces of leaves to the nest. And here's the fungus garden of the leaf cutter ants. We see this very tiny working ants and little bit larger working ants that brings the pieces of leaves from outside and cut them to pieces. And these minims, they take care of the fungus. So fungus fortifications are collected and manipulated by workers to feed larvae. Larva seems to grow on all or nearly all fungus, whereas queens obtain their energy from trophic eggs produced by worker females, some larger ones, and also this larva hemolymph feeding. Adult ants feed mostly on plant sap. Symbiotic fungus is represented only 5% of the energy requirement. Ants are specialized in the degradation of low molecular weight substances, which are like oligosaccharides and heterocytes, whereas the fungus degrades structural polysaccharides of plants that are otherwise not digested by ants on their own. Larvae degrade starch, sucrose, maltose, and live on it, and in certain these other species, the fungus degrades the cellulose. Again, this very specialized fungus. Here we see how larva is feeding on this fungus in the fungus garden. So they eat pieces of the fungus. Here we can see it. Okay, then so it looks like development of larvae to workers, soldiers, and allies, this winged queens and kings, depends on nutrition and pheromones. Adult ants cannot eat solid food, as I said, including grits. So even if it is very small pieces of organic, of plants, they cannot swallow it. The ant larva can chew and process the solids. During foraging, workers collect fluids that are stored in the upper part of the digestive system, the crop, and then it may include sap from plants as well as hemolymph from other insects. It depends on how they, if it is they are preying on other insects, they can keep the sap, keep this hemolymph inside the stomach, inside the special crop size. And upon returning to the nest, these workers regurgitate, so they're spitting out a portion of the stored food and pass it on to other workers. Forager ants bring protein-rich food, like insects, to the colony, where they feed it to the larvae. It is not about garden keeping ants, but it's just this other ants. The queen in a developed colony rely exclusively on larva hemolymph feeding. It is possible that larva hemolymph feeding functions as a filter, providing protection for the queen against toxins and parasites. It is important that the colony has the right number of each caste. If too many ants develop into soldiers, for example, the colony will starve, while a colony with too many foragers cannot take care of its larvae and gardens, or larvae mostly. So the liquid hemolymph feeding may also regulate number of workers, and so I have suspicion that again queen somehow regulate the number of the workers and soldiers and size of the workers, because if it sucks more hemolymph, then the workers develop small. If there are so many larvae and she cannot consume so much hemolymph, then some number of soldiers will appear, etc. In colonies of the leaf-cutting ants, small workers like minima usually care for the larvae and the fungus of the colony feeds on. So we see that again even working bees, which are in nest, can feed on larvae. They are sucking hemolymph from the larvae and from the larval body, and they are feeding on it. So getting energy from this, not from foragers. But foragers, they use normally consume sap of the plants when they cut leaves. Okay, here is some picture, which is again not much related to the leaf cutting ants, but yet okay, interesting. So what we have? We have development of the larva, And of course it depends on genes, but epigenetics actually. It depends on temperature and pheromones, and of course it depends on amount of food. So what they have, it can be different. It can be in different castes. It may be different because the working ants can exchange saliva with the larva, or they are feeding on hemolymph. And here the exchange of the saliva between the foragers and nest workers. So okay, when adult ants feed larvae mouse to mouse, it also can happen, and the juvenile hormone and other signal molecules can be transferred. Okay, it's a self-established colony, and it's evolutionary it develops so that the number of workers, number of minima, number of soldiers and queens is well regulated naturally. What else we have to pay attention? Authors of this recent publication compared microbiomes of queens, newly enclosed workers, brood carriers and foragers of some small European ants, and there were no large differences between the ant castes. But also queens harbored more diverse microbial communities than workers. However, abdominal microbiomes differ between colonies. Interestingly, that colonies with more diverse gut bacteria communities had produced more brood. Moreover, the queen's microbiome composition was linked to high egg production. So if it is more diverse, it is more high production. But again, remember that the queen in established colony, they feed on hemolymph of babies. They don't consume anything from outside. Antibiotic treatment of worker ants lead to a more aggressive behavior against nestmates, which in turn correlated with the decrease in the abundance of two antifungal compounds produced against fungus garden parasites. Also, ants feed with fecal microbiota aggressive remodeling droplets from different colonies were unusually aggressive to ants from the same colony compared to the pairs fed by fecal droplets from the same colony. Obviously, there is a correlation between chemicals produced in guts and the presence of certain microbial species in the microbiome. Microbial species in the microbiome. So specific stent may affect nestmate recognition and division of labor. So okay, it is not related to longevity, but it shows importance of the microbiome. And again, what is important, queens don't eat anything from outside, yet they have a similar microbiome, but even more diverse, which is again, in previous video I was indicating that in humans the diversity of the microbiome gets smaller and smaller with age, while it is the best and it is enriched by friendly bacteria in the infants and toddlers. The resident microbes regulate insect nutrition by controlling the host plant specialization and immunity. It enhances the host fitness and performance by detoxifying some toxins secreted by the predators and abstains them. Research of the insect-associated microbes has revealed their potential to modulate insect brain function and ultimately control their behavior, including social interaction. And the review of the gut microbiota brain axis has now unraveled insects as cost-effective potential model to study neurodegenerative disorders and behavior dysfunction in humans. Again, what we see, the queen lives long and it is sucking a hemolymph from babies. This Hemolymph has very limited amount of sugars, very limited. Mostly this Hemolymph contain proteins and lipids, mostly. So you can make a conclusion what type of diet we have to follow if we want to live long. Meanwhile, workers and foragers, they consume plants, seps and with all toxins from plants, and they live short. They live short. So all plant-based food is actually potentially or really toxic. It's better to avoid it and to live on something which is already detoxified, like eggs. Eggs, for example, it's a perfect example that we can we can eat ourselves eggs, and they have very low amount of toxins. And if our food will be restricted only to eggs, good quality eggs, yeah, then we will live much longer. Of course, meat is also meat of the animals, also kind of filtered food, food with much less toxins. Toxins are produced by plants to protect themselves, to protect babies of the plants. So if you consume seeds, then you consume a lot of toxins, okay, in your body. But some animals are evolutionarily adapted to feed on grains, like chicken. Chicken can detoxify own body, and of course they detoxify eggs, because eggs are filtered many times. This is very pure food, especially if it is free range chicken, and if they can can stay on the sun in clean environment, not in so big companies. So I was keeping hens laying eggs, and it was about 25 or 30, I don't remember for sure, but more than 25 egg laying hens, and they were free range. I was giving them very good food, and I tried to detoxify the seeds by germinating the seeds. You know, the germination of the seeds remove toxins from them, and then I was feeding them with these germinated seeds, rice seeds, and they were producing more eggs. So they were producing up to 5 eggs a week. Instead, if you give them that not germinated rice, then produce only 3 eggs per week, because again it is more hard work to detoxify the seeds. And then when I was eating these free range eggs, they were very good for my health. And next, this which is maybe related to the ants, I was eating a lot of mushrooms. Mushrooms also kind of, they are fruits, of course, and fruits, these are not plants. Fruits are normally low in toxins, and also the mushrooms, they grow on wood chips, not on any kind of grains or whatever. So they grow already on not very toxic substance, and they filter it further so that I can consume the mushrooms, such as, and then it is filtered food, clean food. Not exactly what queen is consuming, but well, it's not bad. It's not bad actually. So combination of eggs with mushrooms, yeah, it gave me so better health that all people were telling me that I'm looking very healthy. So it's like shining, skin was shining. Okay, now I try this business. Unfortunately, doesn't work now because my wife didn't help me. But I can buy free range eggs, and I consume a lot of them, and then I also consume a lot of coconut oil, which is not so high in toxins, and also I take some meat. Feel much better. Okay, queens that are found in colonies get their nutrition at first from breaking down their wing muscles that will never be used again. And when larva appear, the queen feeds them with trophic eggs. she producing eggs, not fertilized eggs, and these eggs larva eats. First generation of workers have weaker bodies and smaller bodies because often much smaller than subsequent workers, as the queen can only provide a limited amount of food compared to that which foraging workers can provide later. In established colony, larval hemolymph feeding is the queen's only way to obtaining nutrients, even when the captured prey, centipedes or mealworms, are available in the brood chamber. So again, I may speculate the difference in the diet of queens and workers define longevity. If we consume filtered food like eggs, exclusively will eat only eggs, then we stay much healthier because we are not getting toxins from outside. And then this is important. Okay, so I expressed my personal opinion. Please mind that I don't provide health consulting. Therefore, a visitor of my channel is advised to discuss the content of this video with his or her personal physician and only act upon the advice of professional medical expert. I am myself special. I never get sick. I always take care of my health. I never go to the medical professional, so I don't need their help. And they probably hate me for this, for being too healthy. Okay, thanks for your time and to watch the video. And please comment, subscribe, like, ask questions, and share information. Have a wonderful day. Ciao.